Have you ever wanted to visit abandoned places that will scare the crap out of you? Whether they're ghost towns, deserted amusement parks or possibly haunted sanatoriums, there are deserted places across the globe. In this video we will show you some amazing places that is abandoned for many years. Rummu Underwater Prison. The prison was built by the Soviet Union and filled with inmates in the 1940s, where the prisoners were forced to work in the nearby limestone quarry. The ruins of an Estonian prison are drowning in the quarry lake. The jail was abandoned when Estonia gained its independence in 1991, and the lack of supervision caused the quarry to quickly fill up with water. Rummu prison is now a popular beach, especially among scuba divers who want to explore the submerged buildings and mining equipment below the surface. The Rummu prison is now open during summer as an adventure center with an entrance fee of €3. Different activities such as snorkeling, paddleboarding, and canoeing to name a few. Houtouwan. A former fishing village located about 87 miles southeast of Shanghai and has been uninhabited for several decades, but this is not your average ghost town. Instead of covered in dust and rubble, these buildings are almost entirely covered with creeping ivy and lush vegetation, creating a green landscape that is more spectacular than devastating. Houtouwan was once an active settlement, inhabited by around 2,000 fishermen and their families. In the early 1990s, when the small bay became increasingly unable to meet the growing fish industry's needs, residents began migrating to the mainland in search of other employment and a better life, a pattern that was common in many small Chinese villages. A few people do still live on the island, selling water to curious tourists and photographers. Houtouwan soared to fame among Chinese netizens in 2015 when a series of mesmerizing photographs of the deserted village went viral. Instead of celebrating its newfound popularity, the officials of Shaanxi archipelago were cautious of the impact brought by the sudden surge of tourists. Visitors can hike around the hilly village for a fee of $8. Signs are put up outside empty houses to warn tourists about the possible danger of entering the deteriorating structures. New bed and breakfast accommodations have also popped up around the island. In 2017, it brought in more than $100,000 in revenue. Cape Romano Dome House. The alien-looking houses were actually the brainchild of a retired oil tycoon who built the structures in 1981 on 10,000 Island, which is south of Marco Island and only accessible via water to be an eco-friendly vacation home for his family. A number of legends have sprung up surrounding the origins of the crumbling cluster of domes at the tip of Cape Romano. Everything from a secret cult to aliens have been credited with creating the space-age buildings, but the truth is the harsh weather and eroding shorelines surrounded the dome homes with water and rendered them unlivable. The firm beach on which the domes were built began to be overtaken by the sea until the domes were surrounded on all sides by water. The dome house was repurchased in 2001. And while the new owner attempted to refurbish the site, property taxes and prohibitive construction costs delayed the project until there was little chance of saving the buildings. There's no plan to try to reoccupy the futuristic buildings. The Maunsell Sea Forts. These giant metal towers in the Thames estuary were actually constructed to protect England from German air raids during World War II. The anti-aircraft tower forts were constructed in 1942. With each fort consisting of a cluster of 7 stilted buildings surrounding a central command tower. When operational, catwalks connected the buildings. Built on land and then transported to their watery homes, the forts were designed by Guy Maunsell, a British civil engineer, later known for innovations in concrete bridge design. Originally there were 3 of these forts, but only 2 are left standing. The Redsons Fort and the Shivering Sands Fort. After their successful wartime career, the forts were decommissioned in the 1950s. The Nor Army fort was badly damaged by both a storm and being struck by a ship and was dismantled in 1959-60. In 2003, the Project Redsons organization was formed with the aim of protecting and possibly restoring the Redsons Fort, chosen over Shivering Sands due to its better state of preservation. Today, one nearby fort is managed by Micronesian Principality of Sealand. The rest can be seen safely from a boat or, on a clear day, the shores of Shoebury East Beach. Great Train Graveyard. It's a cemetery for trains, for locomotives. And it's so big that it looks as though all of the trains in South America were moved to Uyuni, Bolivia. It's only about 3 kilometers away from the Uyuni train station. Uyuni has long been known as an important transportation hub in South America, and it connects several major cities. In the early 19th century, plans were made to extend Uyuni's transportation network and build more train tracks through the city, but the project was abandoned due to technical difficulties and tensions with local indigenous people. The trains were still used to transport minerals to port cities on the Pacific, but the minerals ran out in the 1940s, the miners left town, and the equipment was left sitting out in the desert. Most of the trains that can be found in the graveyard date back to the early 20th century and were imported from Britain. There are over 100 train cars with unique structure and occasional graphitis. Time and salty winds have since corroded the trains, resulting in the great train graveyard you see today. Kalmanskap. The town of Kalmanskap was once the spot of diamond mining and extravagance in 1908. People flocked to what became known as Kalmanskap, Namibia, after the discovery of diamonds in the area in 1908 by Zacharias Luala, a railway worker, who picked up what he thought was an unusually shiny stone and showed it to his supervisor. The supervisor, August Stouch, immediately applied for a prospector's license, and verification confirmed that the first diamond in the region had been found. The diamonds were in such supply that they could be picked off the ground by bare hands, and soon the area was flooded with men wanting to make their fortune. Prior to World War I, over 2,000 pounds (1,000 kilos) of diamonds were sifted from the sands of the Namib Desert, and Kalmanskap became a diamond boom town. During the war, however, the price of diamonds dropped considerably. But once the fair weather inhabitants discovered more diamonds south of Kalmanskap, the site instantly became a ghost town. SS Ayrfield Shipwreck. The area of Homebush Bay was once an industrial crossroads of Sydney, filled with ships transporting coal and oil during the early 20th century. Unfortunately, the waters soon became contaminated and toxic, probably because of all that coal and oil. Once used to transport coal, oil, and war supplies, the ships were eventually decommissioned and simply left where they floated. The most remarkable of these wrecks is the SS Ayrfield, which has miraculously sprouted a lush forest of mangrove trees. The branches of the thriving trees spill from the sides of the ship, slowly breaking down the hull of the long-lived ship which was originally built in 1911. The trees have so completely overtaken the ship, it is a wonder that it still floats. The SS Ayrfield may have survived World War II, but nothing can combat the encroaching hand of nature. From cargo freighter to floating forest, the SS Ayrfield is a beautifully broken-down wreck, forever locked in Australia's Homebush Bay. The area is now a fully functional residential suburb, but you can still catch a few glimpses of Homebush Bay's industrial past, and they're much prettier than you might think. The ship is within Homebush Bay, near the southwestern shore, along with some other wrecks. La Isla de las Muñecas. Also known as Island of Dolls. Hidden among the area's many canals, the site is famous for the hundreds of dolls and doll parts hanging from trees and scattered among the grass. There is a disturbing circular nature to the story of La Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. Over 50 years ago, Don Julian Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Texulo Lake in the Xochimilco canals. This place used to be the actual residence of a now-deceased man named Julian Santabarrera. According to legend, a young woman drowned entangled among the lilies of the canal, and her body was found on the banks of the Santampa Chinampas. Don Julian began to experience inexplicable situations so terrified, he placed dolls that he found in the garbage or in the canals of Xochimilco with the idea that they would scare the soul of the young woman who would cry out, "I want my doll." He also found a doll floating nearby and assuming it belonged to the deceased girl, hung it from a tree as a sign of respect.